the same questions, but you don't have to necessarily sound as harsh.
Right, you can be more diplomatic. I mean, that's the sign of a really good trial lawyer who's able to shift gears. He understands what he's dealing with for a witness. He can then decide, you know what, I'm not going to get anywhere this way. Let me regroup and let's go the nice way. And I'm going to still accomplish what I want to accomplish, which is to bring out information as to whether or not her conduct amounts to reckless disregard. And that's what's going on right now.
What do you think about this whole business of if you cause the death of an unborn fetus, that is the same as a homicide?
That's a difficult question, Ed. And you need to look at that Ohio statute. I've just read it here, and it talks about really, from what I can read, that it really starts from the time of conception. I think that what we're talking about here is that the state of the law in Ohio is real clear that you're going to be liable. You're going to go to trial on the charge of a homicide if you are responsible for the death of an unborn fetus.
In essence, John, it's interesting because I was toying with this all morning. This text of the statute that she is prosecuted under, Ms. Alfieri, is, when I say strict liability, there is nothing here that really will change. It's very clear. It's talking about shall cause the death while participating in the operation of a motor vehicle of another, or the unlawful termination of another's pregnancies in either of the following ways. And it could be recklessly, it could be negligently, and certainly people wind up on the highway driving negligently. Here, they've gone a little further to say it was reckless. But then we have this much broader law, this daily law,
right,
that happened in Ohio and I guess in a few other states. And that law gets to be much more complicated because it talks about the viability of a fetus. And of course, then we get to that point of saying, well, when is the time of viability? It's roughly, according to case law, around 20 weeks.
Right.
But Ms. Alfieri, it doesn't become an issue in her case because this pregnancy was at about 6 months. There's no question that this was a viable newborn.
Right. That daily statute's clear, though, that in 1996, when it was passed in Ohio, that it's at the time of conception, which is very broad, and then, so to speak, puts her in the game for this trial, and that's where we stand at this point.
One of the things that we got, Eddie and I just got as an email, which I thought was really so telling. This comes from a fellow named Dave in Florida, in Williston, Florida. You know where that is, John? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe a client of mine sending that, too.
All right, you never know. You never know. And I thought it was interesting. The defendant...
All right, we're going to go to break after we go to John, right? But first we're going to ask John, what do you think makes people react like this on the road?
I mean, obviously, it's the heat of the moment. People are out there. All of us have done it. We're upset. Somebody cuts us off in traffic. The question is what level you go to. I think the danger here with this cross-examination is, if you touched on it earlier, Ed, is the defensiveness, I think, of the prosecutor. I really think sometimes the jury gets turned off by that. You can make your points, but you don't have to go with that aggressive style. And I think that's what's happening to some degree with this particular witness.
John, one of the things that is difficult for all of us to understand, because we've all seen people who get into road rage on the highway, and at least as far as I'm concerned, I run for cover. I back away. I mean, I'm on the Long Island Expressway, and I see one of these lunatics coming, and then somebody cuts him off, and somebody cuts her off, and somebody cuts him off, and all I want to do...
Well, you used to drive in Boston, so you know.
Oh, gosh, in Boston, right. Yellow means speed up. Right, that's what happens in Boston. The real question here is, what is recklessness? What is it?
Yeah, see, to me, I think that's a critical part of the case for the viewers to understand. Remember, the viewers have to understand that the jury has a task here. At the end of we can have all this debate back and forth during the trial, but the judge is going to give an instruction of what reckless conduct means, and that's the roadmap the jury has to follow, regardless of their own personal feelings. I think the idea that the conduct is what we call a total disregard for the norms. In other words, you know that if you engage in a conduct by braking or causing a brake job, that there is a substantial risk that you may cause harm to someone behind you. That's what the level has to be in this case. The facts have to show that in order to convict this woman.
It's interesting. We've gotten so many emails, and Eddie and I want to thank you for those of us who supported us in the Winona Ryder decision. And we also want to thank those of you who disagreed with us, because that's what makes both sides. But, John, this one is for you to comment on. This comes from Tom, who says, I believe that both women are responsible. They were arguing using their vehicles. The woman that was pregnant should have known better and just concentrated on driving and forget about arguing with another person in their car. That may be so as to how it started, but boy, when it comes to how it ended, as much as you might like to look at both people as having responsibility, what happens here is that the injuries are so horrific that sometimes you forget about the evidence.
Absolutely. I mean, and unfortunately, I think in the legal process, we're in the business of reconstructing crime scenes. We're in the business of doing that as lawyers, as judges. And unfortunately, for the public's view, they're looking at really emotional. And the emotions are not, unfortunately, don't carry the day. What's most important is the elements of the crime. Do these elements exist? And if someone's guilty, then what's the penalty phase of the case? And that's what the law is about. It's about reconstructing what took place based on the evidence from the witness stand, from the testimony of the witnesses, not the lawyer's view, not the judge's view. And then the conscience of the community, the jury's going to decide what takes place out here. And this is a very tragic situation. I represent people in these situations. It's always tragic, the loss of life or serious injury, but we still have to concentrate on what the elements of the law is, and that's what this is about.
You know, one thing is, we got an email which is actually kind of interesting. Tracy Alfieri is driving a Trans Am, and the guy says, I bet she doesn't look like that and act like that outside the courtroom. It's apparently there's all this business of speeding up, flipping, you know, the finger to people. One thing that makes me think is, you know, people are on their best behavior in the courtroom, and the whole purpose of cross-examination, John, isn't it to try to bring the jury to the scene to see what they were like at that time?
Sure. I mean, think about it. You know, we constantly use demonstrative evidence at trial, blow-up charts.
Oh, I was wrong. Gideon tells me that it's a Grand Am, not a Trans.
I thought it was a Trans Am.
I think it's a Grand Am.
Is that right?
Gideon is always right. Gideon is always right.
Well, okay, Grand Am is still a pretty good car.
But it's that fancy kind of, you know, well, sexy was the word the email or the viewers. Whose is that email? Let's give that person credit where credit is due. It was Ed from Lafayette, Colorado. But that does say something. Don't we associate people with what kind of cars they drive, John?
True. I think, you know, the jury is human. They're going to look at a situation and try to, you know, to some degree look at those factors, but it still comes down to what the jury instructions are. I've always felt as a trial or in criminal or civil cases that the jury instructions is the roadmap, and that's what we need to follow in case. That's what the jury's going to follow. And I think in this case, it's still the level, whether it reaches reckless conduct. And that's what she's on trial for. It's a tragic situation, but still it's a legal matter, and that's why we have the courts to work through these difficult situations.
Well, thank you very much, John. I really enjoy having you here. Not as much as I enjoy having your mother and your sister
Always
here.
a pleasure. I thought that email was signed by my mother.
Well, John, listen, you know, it's just great to have you. You know, I mean, knowing you from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as well as Florida.
And I gave you guys those longbow key things.
I was just about to say, you cannot leave with, I didn't get my T-shirt yet, and you know I have a fondness for Longbow Key. I have such a wonderful memory. Did you see me just go there?
I'm going to be fishing down there tomorrow, so I'll be thinking of you, Ricky.
Envy, envy.
Hey, John, make sure I know how to reach you down here. Send me an email, because I maybe want to go down there for a couple of days. You can recommend some place.
You can leave the snow, Ed. We'll be waiting for you in open arms.
Okay, buddy. All right, now we're going to a break, and we're leaving behind John and his mother and sister.